On November 28th, Saturn will turn direct, in which it will begin its final journey forward in Pisces. Saturn in Pisces offered many things to us and the world, primarily reality checks, endings, and the unavoidable reality of dissolving structures, trusting in new ones, as well as asking questions of discipline and commitment, my friends. Now, I wasn't sure if I was going to make a video on Saturn going direct, actually, because typically I don't focus on outer planets necessarily going retrograde or moving direct. I feel evolutionary astrologers are heavily into that. But I do feel when it comes to Saturn and Jupiter, considering those are the two traditional outer planets, that depending on the transit, I think they're absolutely necessary to talk about. And this is one of those transits that not only have we been dealing with Saturn in Pisces for 3 years, but we're dealing with the tail end of a massive re-ingress that occurred over the last couple of months after living in a world where we now know what it tastes like to have Saturn and Neptune in Aries. So this retrograde cycle for Saturn, it's been going on for months now. And we also had eclipse season with Saturn retrograde, in which both the Virgo eclipse and the Pisces eclipse had a massive influence on. So Saturn was right in the crosshairs for those eclipses. And my main message during eclipse season was we all need to get sober to something that's going on in the Pisces whole sign house theme of life, that part of our chart. And again, if you have any eclipse stories, including the Pisces part of your life, that whole sign house, please let me know in the comments. I would love to read your responses to some of your stories and experiences. But Saturn generally in Pisces has been quite the journey. And I think when we talk about Saturn, we are dealing with structures. We're dealing with the boundaries that we need to create or tear down sometimes. And Saturn is known for its ability to force us into roles that require us to become more disciplined, more masterful, and mature, to be quite honest. I think that's why when people go through their Saturn returns, of course, it's a really powerful reality check. And that's another keyword for Saturn, reality checks of maturity. So we're always being asked to mature, to restructure, to become more committed and strong and disciplined wherever Saturn is. And yes, that can sometimes bring hard things into our life. And boy, oh boy, do I have stories with Saturn and the hard things I've had to endure in my life. And if any of you have hardcore Saturn stories, please, I would also love to read those in the comments. But Saturn in Pisces for the last 3 years has been doing its best to bring us reality checks in a particular part of our life that can be very boundless and not have boundaries, maybe. So Saturn in Pisces, in my opinion, is always trying to build a container for the intangible, if that makes any sense. Saturn in Pisces wants to take the formless, take the psychic sensitivity, take the spirit, or whatever's going on in that part of your life, take the confusion and the delusion, mystical and wild, up, down, left and right aspect of Pisces, and bring form to it, to bring structure to it. So Saturn and Pisces themes, generally speaking, learning emotional discernment could have been huge for a lot of us, releasing illusions and fantasies in that part of our life. I would like to think that wherever Pisces is in your birth chart, maybe that's a place where you do have the most fantastical thinking. Maybe that is a place where you fool yourself the most. Maybe that's where you don't have a lot of boundaries and the lines between what is real and not real has always maybe played a role there. Confronting escapism and denial can also be something that Saturn in Pisces can be known for. Healing around trust, boundaries, and vulnerability. So again, Saturn comes in and can provide the reality checks around trust, because Pisces is all about, there's an element of trust and faith with Pisces, believe it or not. The ancients had Jupiter ruling Pisces. And I, as a traditional astrologer, of course, will look to Pisces and say Jupiter is the ruler of that first, before Neptune, believe it or not. So again, when we deal with Jupiterian themes, but in the Piscean way, we're not talking about Jupiter in a Sagittarius philosophical and intellectual belief-oriented way, where we're using maybe more logic around things to navigate belief systems. Pisces is a deeper level of belief. It is a trust and a faith in the deepest of ways, in the unknown sometimes. So Saturn comes into Pisces, maybe for some of us, we've been dealing with healing, actually, around boundaries, trust, faith. Saturn in Pisces for some of us, dissolving long dissolving cycles coming to an end. So maybe there have been things that have been with you for a very long time in that Pisces whole sign house. And Saturn, again, comes in like this wrecking ball of a reality check. And possibly over the last 3 years has dissolved those structures slowly and brought an end to some really, really serious things. And with the eclipses that just happened in September 2025, we're dealing with very sobering moments that shocked the collective. There were things that happened in the world that were very shocking and sobering, that dealt with very powerful figures and people that had structures built in their life. And for a lot of us, while retrograde, mind you, during the eclipse cycle, there was this reviewing maybe of the things we've been through or the things that we have structured and have been building in the Piscean part of our life. And that might have gotten a little foggy and hazy while Saturn has been retrograde. And those eclipses, I think, could have sobered us up to some stuff still going on in Pisces and saying, hey, we really had ourselves on the right track here. Like, did you fall off the wagon, or are you still doing what you're supposed to be doing here? Are you still committing yourself to what you know in your heart you need to be committing yourself to? Because there's old cycles that we have been dissolving. There are old things in this part of your life that we have been trying to dissolve so you could become more mature and more wise and stronger. So again, and there's also this emphasis on, again, restructuring and again, having meaning and faith in that part of our life. So again, anything that Piscean part of our life is all about, bringing meaning to that part of our life and also having faith in the new things that Saturn has been trying its best to bring clarity to. So Saturn going direct is a turning point right now in this story as we wrap up karma and life experience over the last 3 years, over the last 14 years with Neptune that's been there. So again, there is this double emphasis actually on dissolving and ending massive cycles that Pisces has always been known for you, at least over the last decade. I mean, reflect on the last 14 years of your life while Neptune has been there. Saturn comes in the last 3 years and goes, hey, we need to make things a little bit more tangible and structured here before we enter a new age, literally the age of fire and air. So when Saturn and Neptune get into Aries, I mean, we are leaving Pisces behind, but what is left in the wake? That is what we are trying to focus on now. This is why it's important to meditate into what Saturn and Pisces has meant to you all these years, meditate into what this specific retrograde cycle has meant, because we had a moment to still review some stuff, to get clearer emotionally, as well on the reality of many situations in our life, of course. And right now, as this direct moment happens, we are also in the thick of grand water trines. I mean, new moon in Scorpio happened November 19th and 20th. Okay. And Saturn doesn't even go direct until the 28th, of course. So whenever you're watching this, we have time before Saturn even goes direct. But during the time of the new moon in Scorpio, grand water trines to Jupiter and Saturn, of course, and Neptune from Scorpio. But when Saturn goes direct, okay, November 28th, we are going to have Venus trining Saturn and Neptune and trining Jupiter in Cancer. And then in a couple of days later, Mercury will then be stationed going direct, moving towards the late degrees of Scorpio. And then we will have Mercury reactivating grand water trines. So the grand water trine energy in the air is really, really important to note during the beginning of the station as Saturn begins to move forward, because this is actually could be some of the medicine we need to understand, confronting emotional truth, deep healing of old wounds that are also a part of the Scorpio story and the Jupiter and Cancer story. Psychic openings, the heightened sensitivity and the emotions that I've been feeling lately are insane. And it also has a lot to do with that fifth house for me, because I'm a Scorpio rising. And I've been blathering on about that in all my other videos, trying to relate to you like how emotional and how out of sorts I've been. And everybody I know, other astrologers I know, are making videos on their emotional things that are happening to them during this pre-new moon in Scorpio stuff. So when Saturn goes direct, I mean, this is not going to end, but if anything, Venus is going to activate this direct station, which is already bringing in themes around relationships and attachments and old patterns involving relationships. And again, just things involving our interconnectedness and the harmony that we have or don't have in our life. And this could be a beautiful moment for those psychic openings to become more and more expansive. But at the same time, we need to anchor them in reality. So I think by the time Saturn goes direct and Venus is going to be the planet most heavily activating the grand water trines at that time, this is going to be a moment, I think, of clarity and confronting emotional truths and getting really, really serious about the aftermath even of the new moon in Scorpio. So I think when Saturn goes direct, there is this kind of purification of our reality within and without, and we start to see things much clearer. Now on the world stage, I mean, there's a lot of people that are starting to wake up to the fact that that the administration that they voted for in America, for example, is nothing for what they voted for. And they are all coming to serious reckonings and realizations. And this grand water trine activity from the new moon in Scorpio, which again, bombshell Epstein stories left and right, with the secrets in the depths of the Scorpionic constantly being unearthed and being in focus. And so many people are having their realities completely shattered, their belief systems. And Saturn in Pisces, that has been messing around and structuring and bringing more and more, boundaries to ideologies. Even a lot of people are having their worldview and their boundaries completely shattered. And Saturn is, again, that cosmic reality check around some of that. So the fact that Saturn goes direct right now after a crazy political month, that's just one other example that these water trines activating the emotions and people's just psychic sensitivities, and they're getting hit with reality checks left and right. Deep healing of wounds are being asked to, or there's deep wounds being asked to be healed in this moment in many ways. And the release of attachments to things that maybe they thought were the next thing since sliced bread, So the grand trines the grand water trines in the air while Saturn goes direct. To me, this is a triangular field of emotional intelligence and psychic depth. And Saturn is going to be the root, the foundation that allows us to move into December actually much more grounded. And there's a lot of transits there's a lot of planets rather moving into Capricorn in December as well. So I think December into January, there's going to be a feeling of being more grounded and things getting really, really serious. And that is, again, a Saturn ruled sign, Capricorn. So this idea of whatever is going to be emotionally released and brought to the surface, the reality checks that we're going to have one last time with Saturn as it starts moving forward, heading towards Aries, which will happen in February. We have this last moment of emotional clearing, emotional intelligence, and psychic depth coming online and allowing the truth to be seen more clearly. So we're talking a couple of months after the eclipses, and we are still catching up to the memo of what getting sober in Pisces actually means. And this is really, really important for us all to understand, guys. So please let me know what the Pisces story is in your life. I mean, I think I've shared a lot about my life, and Pisces being the fifth house, being the house of creative energy for me. I mean, my ascendant's at 29 degrees. So again, the grand water trines literally affecting the core of who I am, and the creative energy house, very much a story around how I show up, even for you guys, content creation, a lot of the creative things I do outside of my astrology work, but even everything I do with astrology, I'm constantly creating more and more of how I want to show up for students and you beautiful subscribers. And this is a very creative thing that I'm doing here, showing up, making videos, and expressing myself, being vulnerable with you, wanting you to be vulnerable with me, and sharing this space together. This is very creative. I'm birthing something into existence here. And Saturn in Pisces over the last 3 years is really what has taught me a lot about cameras and social media and expressing myself more fully and more authentically even. So the last couple of months, again, just sort of being in this review and restructuring things and just contemplating things and releasing old illusions and old versions of myself as a prior artist and other other forms of being a creative, because I've always been an artist in my life. So releasing old forms of artist Joe and realizing, wow, my future really is in this new way of expressing myself, and getting very comfortable around that, and how so many people now watch me and admire what I'm doing and support my work, and also trusting in myself and in my creative process. Like I said, Saturn in Pisces theme, one of the big things, healing around trust, boundaries, and vulnerability. So being more vulnerable and comfortable and trusting in my ability to share from my heart and to hopefully have that connect with you. And then also leaving a door open for you guys to connect with me, and having this very flowy, but also very structured container for us to sit together like this, you know? So again, this direct motion, emotional clarity. Okay. A lot of people who voted for Trump, they might be having a post-nut clarity, not to drop an innuendo like that, but a lot of them are having emotional clarity where they're like waking up from a nightmare going, oh my God, like, I can't believe this is happening. This is not what I voted for, blah, blah, blah. So again, emotional clarity after months and possibly years of fog for some people. And again, maybe focusing more on a commitment to something that could be a little bit more beneficial for them or for us. Like, what could we commit ourselves to that is healing and creative? And this can also be the end of wandering and the return of some inner direction. So I could tell you, like in my own experience, I feel I'm just on the edge on November 18th right now as I'm recording this. I feel as of this point in this Pisces area of my life, even though I'm very highly emotional still from these grand water trines, I could already sense into that there is something coming around the bend that will anchor me back into the ground, and all will be fine. All will be well. And everything that I've learned and built and structured and become more disciplined and committed in my life will mature and up-level itself as I get into December, into January, and as Saturn gets back into Aries. Now, before I continue, my friends, because I do briefly want to talk about the last decan of Pisces and the first decan of Aries, actually, because that is where Saturn and Neptune are going. And I talked a lot about these two decans in the beginning of the year, because as we were preparing for Saturn and Neptune to go into Aries, I made tons of videos on these decans, but I figure just for the sake of education and just talking about the decans, as many of you know I love to do, we're going to do that. We're going to do that a little bit today as well. But before I continue, I would just like to say, if you are enjoying my work this video thus far, please consider subscribing to the channel, liking the video. All that stuff really helps the channel's growth, my friends, and it would really mean a lot. And also, if you would like to book readings with me, you can check out my website and you could easily book yourself a reading. Links down below. I think I have some spaces left in December if you would like to snag one. And also my Decans and Minor Arcana mini course will be launching January 4th, but you could pre-order it now for a discounted price. That discounted price will last until December 1st. So yeah, my friends, that's really all I have to say as far as little shameless plugs there. And yeah, let's get right back into talking about the decans and then concluding this conversation today. Okay, so let's talk about this last decan of Pisces and how this ties into the story of what the new future will be all about. Now, the last decan of Pisces is ruled by Mars, and the first decan of Aries is ruled by Mars. Now, this is really important to understand because Mars is the flavor of the time we live in, okay? Mars acts as a cycle pump and a gatekeeper for this Saturn and Neptune transit. We are talking about escorting ourselves, escorting our soul, if you will, out of an old cycle so it can be reborn into a new one. Symbolically, Pisces, and literally, is the last zodiac sign of the zodiac, of astrology, period, full stop. Aries is the new beginning, period, full stop. Saturn is the world builder. Saturn brings the structure. It is the work. It is the commitment and discipline we need to create something very real. And Saturn leaving Pisces is the end of a massive spiritual cycle and the birthing and an ignition into physical form once again. Aries is the will of existence. It is the action, the will, the self-reliance, the assertiveness, the movement forward, the actions we must take. And Pisces is all about dissolving and letting go, trust, faith, sensitivity, psychic depth, all those beautiful Piscean things. And in the negative sense, right, we're talking about disillusionment. We're talking about illusion and being confused and hazy. What's real? What's not real? And Saturn has been trying to build and structure in that part of our life. But as we got to this last decan, my friends, this is all about the actions we take in order to finally complete something. So this is not passive completion. This is active participation within the cycles of endings and completion. And the 10 of Cups rules this decan, okay? And the 10 of Cups, yes, is the happily ever after card. Most tarot readers will say that. But esoterically, this really represents completion, transcendence from all of the other zodiac signs and decans that followed it. It is release. It is the final out-breath. It is the returning to source, in fact. Dissolving of the ego back into the oceanic whole, the whole of the all. And with Mars activating this decan that rules this tarot card, okay, we are talking about a dissolution that is active, not passive. It is a chosen ending. We have a very powerful independence and quality of free will in this closing chapter. It is a karmic release with intention. So it is extremely important for us all to wake up to what we have learned in Pisces and what the eclipses showed us. Everybody who voted for Trump, it is happening in a very active way where they are waking up to a fact that this isn't the man we voted for. This isn't the ideology I signed up for, you know? And not that they're having some wake-up call to become like, I don't know, people who are maybe in alignment with an ideology that could be a little bit more inclusive. But still, they're having this karmic reckoning and this ending that is very active, this transcendence, this final outbreath that, oh my God, I am done with this man, right? And then there are people who are fighting against that. And they are saying, this Epstein shit comes to an end now. This new world is going to be born now. This old world is leaving. These old structures, these old leaders. You know, if Trump somehow gets removed, or if his health fails, if he somehow disappears, this would be Saturn in the last decan of Aries, Pisces at play. Mars actively releasing, actively completing a cycle and structuring this and making things very, very serious, but also having us think about where it's going next, which is the first decan of Aries, which is also Mars ruled. So Aries, this first decan of Aries, is all about the igniting, the spark of will, the personal vision, direction, autonomy, choosing a path, initiation, setting a new mission into motion. And this is also ruled by this Two of Wands in the tarot. And the Two of Wands, yes, is that spark of will, is that personal vision. It is the beginning of a new path that we must choose. Now, we may not know what that path is yet, but we know that what we're leaving behind will no longer serve us right now. But what we left behind, or what we did in Pisces, that completion, we should feel anchored into it. And the integration phase of all of that will probably take years, right? I mean, again, once a transits through a zodiac sign, we don't just like forget that it happened. You know, we're dealing with the aftermath of all of that, and we're still working with the Pisces part of our life. There are still transits that fly through Pisces, you know, and activate karma there. It's just when we have big enough transits like Saturn that comes in for years and is trying to bring you the reality checks and to offer new ways to be committed and disciplined, to take things out of your life, to put up boundaries, to restrict things from you so you can learn how to overcome challenge, to build new foundations. We have to work with that. And that last decan of Pisces, where Saturn and Neptune are back again, it's asking us to understand the depth of release, of completion, of transcending and actively participating in the completion of cycles and the transcendence of them, so we can build a new world, so we can go into the Aries part of our life, that next zodiac sign, house, topic, theme of life after Pisces in your chart, and realize like, this is the part of my life I'm going to have to become much more awake and really envision a new dream for myself. And Saturn's going to help structure that. And that it's time to put to rest the old stories and the old cycles that have now completed themselves. So this really is about karmic contracts closing. So this is something in my notes. Saturn and Neptune moving from the last decan of Pisces into the first decan of Aries. Karmic contracts close, spiritual responsibilities end for some people. So again, spiritual responsibilities, like things that you have been really, really diligent in, that have been really working out your spiritual discipline. You may have passed the test, as the sensei says, and you can now be free. Structure dissolves. Some structures will dissolve in the tail end of this direct motion transit. And discipline is reborn into Aries. Okay, so again, it's time to get more disciplined in action versus disciplined in what needs to be let go and reimagined and whatever Pisces was for you. Again, Pisces is more about the trust and the belief and the structuring of new spiritual stability. And Saturn has been trying to work with that. Where in Aries, we're going to be strictly dealing with movement, action, and the will of what we desire and what we wish to move forward in our life. And the world has a lot to dream into being. There's a lot of new things that need to be manifest. There's a lot of new leaders that maybe need to come out of the ground after old ones fall. Or there's a lot more war and fighting on the menu that needs to be fought and had. That's also true. That may happen, which we need to prepare ourselves for. But there will be a lot of illusions that end. Dreams will be reset. Faith transforms. Intuition reorients to a new future. So together, Saturn and Neptune concluding their run in Pisces also is the end of a collective dream, the rebirth of a new collective vision. So it's now time to put our money where our mouth is and to release what's no longer serving us anymore. And again, I love the Mars decans, how we actively end a cycle by dissolving what's no longer needed officially. Having those final reality checks. And then preparing ourselves actively to move forward and to dream anew, to build anew. So the same fire that ends is the fire that begins. I have here in my notes. Mars closes the story in Pisces, and the moment he hands you the torch in Aries, your task is to decide what you will do with it. I'm going to end this there. Thank you so much, my friends, for watching. I hope you enjoyed this talk today. Please check out my description box once again if you would like to book readings, sign up for my mini course, and I will see you in the December forecast.